Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in your everyday life. Thanks for tuning in again, especially if you tried to tune in last week, listen to and or watch with very poor audio. I apologize, my bad. We should be good today recording with everything rolling just fine. Triple checked it. Kyle even had to remind me to push the button one more time because I didn't push it. So anyways, we're back at it. Craig, how you doing? Kyle, how you doing?
Doing great.
Yeah?
Just wonderful.
Just peachy, ready to go? Excellent. Well, I'm excited. I appreciate people. You know, we do this podcast to help people in their everyday life, like what it means to follow God and get exposed and hear other people's stories of transformation. And so, more than just like my bad, it's a bummer when like, hey, there's some helpful stuff. People want to tune in and then you can't listen to it because it's so bad.
Yeah, actually, I thought the content last week was as good as ever. It
really
was a lot
was.
of good stuff we shared.
I think so too, and to be helpful. Again, not trying to brag or toot our own horn here,
Well,
but
sometimes it's a little better. Sometimes it was right up there with some of the better ones as far as content.
so if you could get through some of it or all of it, we applaud you. We appreciate you listening. We're going to strive to do better and keep it rolling. And so if you did listen last week, though, and you tried, we are going to hit a few of the high points from last week as far as where we're headed, just kind of the base content for the podcast. So, we'll have guests in and out, and so we'll jump into their stories more on those weeks. Like next week, hopefully, I think we'll have a guest next week.
I think we will.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't asked, but
I think we will. We'll see.
we will.
We'll make it work. But one of the things that's happened in my world this week is, Craig, you asked me before we got started how I was doing. In Spanish, and my horrible Spanish back was like, a little tired. We are in full basketball mode at our house. Not only like peak of the Zag season, which we're catching all that, watch a few other games, but Olivia's playing basketball for school, so she's got practice every day and then a couple games a week. So you were at a game?
Yep,
We had
we
a
were
good
there
cheering
watching
section.
Olivia.
We had
Yep.
grandparents, cousin, aunts, and then started coaching Wyatt's 5th and 6th grade park and rec team last night. So I get way too pumped about coaching 5th and 6th grade basketball, but I love it. It's you talk about sweet spot, people in their sweet spot. I get to innovate, design, coach them up, teach, encourage, and we're doing it around basketball. So one kid was sick or quarantining or something, I don't know. Who wasn't there? And so there's only 6 kids. We only have 7 on our team. If you know anything about basketball, you get 5 on the floor at one time. So it's going to be interesting.
They're going to be
how long
tired.
do they play?
Short bench. 4 quarters. 10-minute quarters?
Oh, wow.
I think we're 10-minute quarters. I think
They're full on.
maybe 8 minutes. No, not 10. It's got to be 8.
I was going to say, that sounds like a lot
That's
for
too much.
5th and 6th graders.
Yeah, I think it's 8-minute. But it's going to be plenty.
Yeah.
Let's just say, not everybody's in shape for basketball.
Yeah.
And we only get one practice a week. So,
Oh, wow.
dialing in a motion offense is going to be super
Yeah.
Super
Easy.
great. Oh, man.
One practice a week.
Yeah.
Is that normal? I'm trying to remember back to my park and rec days a long time ago.
Yeah. It's good. I mean, sure, I'd love to have another practice, but it's to help the kids. Some of the kids have never played on a team
But
before.
Scott, the extraordinary coach that you are, do you need more than one
Oh, yeah,
practice?
you got it.
per
Locked
week?
in.
Oh, yeah. So I may
like a
or may
potent-
not have printed out a double-sided offensive chart with out of bounds play on the backside because I only get one offensive, shot a week, and so we ran them through it. But I mean, it's great. Kids jumping in all skill levels. Some kids have never played on an organized team; they're just used to recess ball, and so like here's how you make a layup, like fundamental, because that's our whole goal. We're gonna make a bunch of layups or 3-foot shots. Everybody gets enamored with a 3-pointer. But listen, we ain't Steph Curry, okay? We're not living in a gym for 6 hours a day for the last 30 years.
We saw a couple of 3-pointers last night, and I was pretty impressed.
Surprising.
Like, really,
7th grade girls, there
Yeah.
was 3 of them.
there was.
Yeah.
One of them was a swoosh, if I remember right. Just nothing but net right
ripping
in there.
Ripping it.
It was a few high points of a not
Well,
quite a strong offensive set there.
Nope.
No. So, yeah, we're back at it tonight. She's got a game tonight with a team that's like substantially better. So they're going to be tired. It's going to be a lot of cheering. It's gonna be great. So, anyways, super excited about that. It's fun to get after coaching kids up in basketball. Yeah, I love it. So if anybody's listening in the Zag world, you need an assistant coach, hit me up.
They probably got time. They're not playing, postponing every game.
I thought you were gonna say they probably don't have anybody interested.
No, I've probably got people itching to do real basketball.
Yeah, but it's fun. The team behind us didn't show up for their practice, so then Wyatt and I stayed late. Another kid stayed, and he's like, "Hey, do you guys mind if I shoot with you?" I was like, "No." So then able to help coach him up. He's never played on a team before, but he's pretty athletic, and just showing him basics, how to box out and rebound, and how to shoot the ball, and just encouraging them. It's super fun for me. I love it. Yeah. So we're running like basically the same offense the Zags run most of the time, like on a motion. I'm excited. I got high hopes on it as far as it working.
You guys going to be ranked number 1. You're going to go all the way. National championship.
It's 6 games on Saturdays, man. It's not that intense, but you know how it is. People listening, you've been to like your kids or somebody else's kids like soccer game when they're little or basketball, and it's just kind of a scrum.
Yes.
There's not a lot of organization. There's not a lot of skill. Like we're at the place 5th and 6th grade. There's some kids that have a little bit, some skills, and to be able to like space the floor, work together as a team, it's just going to hopefully translate, and we'll see what happens. But you know how it is. We're just like it's run around chaos, and it's just a lot of, as a participant, it's kind of like, well, I don't even know what to do. So hopefully we'll get them clued in on what's happening, what to do. And so what's going on in your guys' world this week?
Well, right after we get done with this podcast, I have a couple of Zoom calls that are related to my work with Think Small, the organization that reaches out and helps kids all over the world in various countries to avoid the pitfalls of human trafficking, drugs, and alcohol, and at the same time introducing them to Jesus. Amazing what God's doing. Phenomenal.
And so who you zooming in with today?
The two founders, the originators of the ministry, one of them with the wife and some of the administrative stuff with Kelsey from our church here, and then with the husband, Gary, his name is, and another pastor. We're going to do some strategizing. So that's the second one.
So it's kind of like a business side of the ministry instead of working with like the local leader. Because you've been on those before,
Yep.
right? Zooming
I have
in
been
with-
on those, and we'll continue to be on those where
Yeah.
they're training people over Zoom in these countries. Just amazing what's going on. When Gary and Paula first started the ministry a little over 15 years ago, their vision was to reach 1 million kids for Christ. And they just passed the 800,000 mark worldwide. Not them personally, but the teams that they've created, operating in all these different countries, 5 teams in Thailand, 3 or 4 teams in Burundi, a couple of teams in India, et cetera. And then now teams are training teams. So the Burundi team is training teams in Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, et cetera. It's just really exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's the way it works. Disciples making disciples.
Exactly.
And it's not about one person trying to travel the world and tell everybody.
Right.
Like Jesus even said, 3 years, we're good. We got a good start. Over to you guys.
Yep.
Holy Spirit inspired.
Work yourself out of a job, pass the baton, let them run with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the best mission strategy, whether it's here in the United States or in some other country in the world. If there was a better plan, Jesus would have used it. But he did what he did because it was the best way.
Yeah, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but we started the Gospel of Matthew and reading through the life of Christ as far as his ministry life and his plan and his approach and his strategy to discipling people and how we jump on that, on board with him and what he's got going on. So, Kyle, what's up with you in your world?
Oh, man. Not a lot coming up. We did Fusion last night, back in the youth world, hanging out with middle school and high school students. So that's fun. It's a whole lot of energy and excitement. So I'm a little more tired on Thursday mornings than I normally am. Wednesday is a long day. But it's fun being back with the team, and Fusion's doing some amazing things. And
You got winter camp coming up,
we
don't you?
do. We got winter camp coming up February 4th. Chugging along on that. I think we have like 42 students signed up.
You got 2 more yesterday.
I did get a couple more. Redheads.
And there's other churches involved.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big event, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we'll have close to 400 maybe. I don't know where everybody else's registration's at. But getting ready for that. And probably go do some snowboarding tomorrow. And
Yeah, what's the is it rainy forecast? What are we
yeah,
thinking?
it's warm-ish.
It's warm-ish.
They
It's
got a
right at
couple-
the edge,
Yeah,
yeah.
they got a couple inches last night, but probably pretty heavy. And then today's like, I think I looked this morning. It was 33. I was like, ah.
Oh,
So
yeah, it's right on that. Just needs a couple more degrees.
Yeah.
Ah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, good. So as we're jumping back in, let's just hit a few of the highlights from, we're jumping into Matthew. We're going to just kind of chug through without a strategy as far as like a detailed plan. The strategy is always to go with the flow of the conversation. And we talked a lot about, the setup and who is Matthew and jumping into that. But I really wanted to encourage listeners and myself with reading it through Jesus' discipleship strategy, which we'll hit coming into Matthew 4, it's verse 4:19, where Jesus lays out this real clear, simple plan, and then we see it followed up for the rest of his ministry for years, is to connect with God personally, to grow intentionally with others, and then to serve God by serving other people in your sweet spot. And so that's Matthew 4:19 when he's making this call, which is backwards for the day because people would choose their teacher. They would choose their rabbi. They're like, hey, I like Craig. He's a good teacher. I'll follow Craig. It's kind of like what we do now, with access to teachers and preachers from around the world. You're like, I'm going to listen to that guy, tune into that lady in her ministry, teaching. But Jesus went around and says, I'm choosing you to do this mission, which is kind of fun and cool. And then to grow intentionally with others is so making it personal, the connect part, making it personal. And then we need that because we need to have salvation from our sins. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole point. And that's what we kind of, for me, the highlight of chapter 1 is Matthew's making this point. Here's the story of the Messiah, the chosen one, the one we've been waiting for, the promised one. And then, was it verse 21? For the reason you're going to give him the name Jesus, which I think, Craig, you brought up last week.
Yeshua,
Yeah. And
which Jehovah saves, Joshua, in its various forms. It was a common name in the day, but it had a Hebrew meaning. In the Hebrew, it meant Jehovah or Yeshua, Joshua. It meant Jehovah saves.
Right. And it's that reference back for Matthew's writing to a lot of Jewish readers and listeners. And so they would quickly recognize, hey, that's the same dude that saved God's people out of Egypt, and all the symbolism and foreshadowing that happened through the nation of Israel. In verse 21, it says, because he will save his people from their sins.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to connect with him personally, not just through a spouse or a friend or through an association with a church or something like that, but each individually. And then to grow intentionally with others is doing life together. It's Father, Son, Holy Spirit. God is a communal God. And then we're designed for community, be with people. And then to serve, help others find and follow Jesus, and just do that in a way that is our God hardwired sweet spot, our passion, the skills and experiences we have, and to use those and leverage those to help other people find Jesus.
In Matthew 4:19, Jesus specifically says to some fishermen, he says, come and follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. So he leveraged what they knew and gave them a little bit of a clue as to what his end game was, where he was going to go with their lives. And to put it another way, he was just inviting them to be on a journey with him and with the other disciples. It's like, hey, let's go do this. Mm-hmm. Come spend some time with me, and these other guys will grow together. And the end game is that I'm going to equip you and empower you and commission you to go change the world. And when we get Connect, Grow, Serve, which we're talking about, when we get it right, we understand not just the what, but the why behind the what and the heart of God. It's a powerful invitation from our God and Creator and our Redeemer to be on a journey with Him to change the world. Mm-hmm. That's not an overstatement.
No, exactly. And it'll help us have some framework for those 3 building blocks to be in our lives. And if you just take kind of a personal self-assessment real quick and go, hey, how am I doing connecting personally with God on a daily basis, that I am following Jesus and want to spend time with Him, connecting with Him, and then how am I doing growing with other people, and what am I doing on a week-to-week, month-by-month basis to serve other people in my sweet spot, and not just sit on the gifts and talents God's given me and do nothing with them, or real, bare minimum, but that's the key to longevity, persevering, following Jesus. Maybe you've got a friend, you're like, I don't know, they just kind of always are drifting in and out with like following Jesus. I guarantee you, one of those building blocks or two of them are missing in their lives.
Absolutely.
And they're like, I'm good. I just kind of read and do some personal devotional things, and I kind of read them by myself. Well, it's good, but that's not the whole picture. That's not what it fully means to follow Jesus. So as we're trying to help others, just looking at those three building blocks, like what's missing? What needs to, not even missing, but maybe what's low, and so what needs to grow. Well, that was a good, like what's low
Yeah.
needs to grow.
Wow.
I should write that one down.
Get your notebook there.
I got a pen
He's
right
gonna
here.
do
What
it.
do you know?
It's happening.
I might do it. It might be sticky.
Yeah, so you hit that last week, and then just kind of sum up where we were last week with Matthew 1. You hit on it, Matthew writing to a primary Jewish audience, and we talked about the importance of the genealogy there and the weight behind what that would have meant to the first century, listeners, and how important that was, diving into who Jesus was, all the prophecies that he fulfills, all these things that they've been hearing about for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, about God's redemptive plan, and all of Scripture pointing to a unified story to Jesus. And so all of that, Matthew, I think, really anchors his gospel into everything else you've heard, and you've been following God and understanding all of these things. Jesus is the fulfilled promise that you've been waiting for. Maybe not the way you expected it, and you're going to hear about this whole thing, but that first chapter really building that foundation and, again, anchoring who Jesus is to the fulfillment of the promises that many of the Jewish listeners would have been waiting for, eagerly questioning God about, looking for, searching for, and wanting to know the answer to.
Yeah, and lots of people were looking for him. As we jump into chapter 2 here, there's more fulfillment of prophecy, all of the writings and the hundreds and thousands of years for waiting for the Messiah. And so there's this group of magi, wise people from the east, wherever that is, down south or somewhere east of Jerusalem.
Down south, east.
Well, could
They're
have
probably from the region that was formerly Persia, because the Magi were actually priests in the culture of the Persians, and knowledgeable about astrology and prophecies and other cultures and stuff. These are, and as a matter of fact, in that culture, these guys had a position of power and influence over the leaders of their own country. And so we're not, and when these guys would travel, they would always travel with, because they were people of influence and wealth, they would travel with an entourage that include armed individuals. So it's not just three guys like we see depicted, in the Christmas nativity scene.
the entourage doesn't fit in the nativity scene
No,
on
the entourage
the
does
mantle.
not. It might have been dozens and dozens that were traveling with them. This is a big deal when they show up in town. That's why Herod gets so worried and nervous. It's not just that they're asking about the king who was born, the king of the Jews. It's that they represent a real presence that threatens his position. In his insecurity, he's threatened by the fact that Jesus is born and that the Magi are there. This whole thing is unnerving to him.
Yeah, and I think that's a helpful thing to understand, that there's more than three dudes that showed up. Because Herod's going to take some drastic action here in a second. And you're like, what? That doesn't seem reasonable. Yeah, it does if you think he's thinking there's this political force coming from the east, maybe a nation or two, that was going to want to come and really make him the king of
Yep.
his territory.
Yeah, there's a little phrase in verse 3, chapter 2, verse 3, that I think we can easily miss. It says, when King Herod heard this. So this is the question from the Magi, where is the one who's been born king of the Jews? We saw a star. We've come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him.
Yeah.
The whole town was rocked by the presence of these three Magi, their entourage, and the reason that they were there. And it went viral. I mean, it was, people were talking about it all over town. This is a big event. And we miss that a lot of times in our Christmas observance of the Magi.
Exactly. In reading this again in preparation for this, I read that and I was like, I always knew Herod was disturbed and upset and insecure. But then I read in all Jerusalem with him. I'm like, well, I don't even know what that means. What kind of disturbed? There was a lot of people on the lookout for a Messiah, but were they disturbed for political unrest, society disruption? I don't know, anything we've referenced the last couple of years in our world. You can kind of say like all of America is disturbed as a reference to, man, there's a lot of civil disobedience and political unrest and uncertainty about so many different topics, you could say, yeah, there's been a lot of disturbance in the last almost 2 years. So I was struck by that as well. But I love that they are led by a star. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always just intrigued by nature and how all of creation speaks of God, God's glory. We've talked about that in the past, but like Romans 1, or just all of creation shouts of God's glory, and people know it. It's built into our hearts, and you just see sunsets and different things. I've seen shooting stars. I don't know. I still get blown away. Do you guys get blown away? You're driving along, or you step outside, and you can see planets? Is that just me, or is that just crazy?
My wife and I were having that conversation the other day. I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about galaxies and our universe, and then the vastness of space, and yeah, it's mind blowing. Like it hurts my head thinking about like the infinite galaxies in our it's crazy.
Yeah, and then the God of the universe just spoke that into existence, and whatever that is, we don't know. We
Yeah.
haven't been to the far end of it. We don't know.
And I think that was what my wife brought up. She was like, and then he made the earth that's like this perfect place for humans to live, and he made us on this earth. And you think about that, and you think about the other, planets even in our solar system, but then there's Earth that's this perfect inhabitants for us, and the way God made it. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's pretty cool. Like seeing shooting stars, or just in creation, I get blown away. So Tuesday night we were leaving community group in Liberty Lake. It was like 8:30, 9 o'clock. We left, and so if you're familiar with Liberty Lake, there's a new cut through road by Huntwood on the east side of Huntwood. It dumps into Appleway. So if you're familiar with that area, so anyways, it's the quickest way for us to get to State Line, get on the freeway. So we go that way all the time. Well, they're building tons of apartments back there and some new homes. So we come through the neighborhood, and there's a little hill. You go up, and it's literally just right on the east side of Huntwood and kind of behind it. You go up this little hill and then back down. Get to the top of the hill, crest it. There's a herd of about 40 elk standing, and
What?
half of them are in the road. And they're just standing around, and there had been it's 9 o'clock in Liberty Lake, and there's no traffic. And half of them are, like 20 of them are in the road. There's probably like a 5-point bull standing there, like just watching the ladies.
Are you
I think I
kidding me?
saw another little spike.
We live out in the country, and it's rare for us to see elk at all, much less a herd that big.
Yeah, 40, maybe 50.
Wow.
And so we
Just
cross
hanging out
over,
Liberty Lake.
and they're standing in the road, so I have to stop. And they're like, duh, if you ever, and it's a herd mentality. So then one shoots it. So they head back from where they came from, which is literally just a construction site, mounds of dirt, and there's equipment over there. And so they go back that way, and we go down. Well, there's a road, residential road right there, right before Appleway. I'm like, well, I'm pulling over. I'm turning around. So the hunter in me arises. So I park the car in the middle of the street, leave it running, hop out, start walking up the sidewalk.
And you started doing your elk calls.
I'd already done that. I rolled the window down.
I knew it.
Yeah, for sure. Just to try to get them to stop, And so I walk up. I'm standing against a light post, and when I get up to where they had broke down the construction fence, and they're starting to cross the road, I don't know. It's probably like 15 yards, 20 yards, and there's 2 cows standing there, because animals are so predictable. They'll get spooked or jump, but they want to go somewhere. They're trying to get somewhere, so they'll circle around and come right back if you just wait. So anyways, they came. I think the wind, and they maybe heard me, a little bit of footsteps, but I think the wind was kind of just rising, because they got to the edge of the thing, looked at me, I looked at them, and then they're like, skip it. And
Yeah.
they all-
What
they all
was your
bolted.
goal at this point? What?
I was
He
going
was
to
gonna
watch
wrestle
them.
one to the ground.
Yeah, I was like, what?
No,
what
I
are
just,
you doing?
I just love to be close to them.
Okay.
It's intriguing. It's fun. I was gonna hopefully sneak up, and hopefully if the wind was right, that they would just cross over with the route they were gonna go.
Jump on and ride one or something.
No, just
Trying
being
to
so
understand.
close, man. My whole point is I love seeing
Sneak up on 'em.
God's creation in like nature, and seeing the beauty of, if you've ever been in the woods, and I have many times, out deep in the national forest, and you hear an elk bugle, you're like, it's majestic. There's a glory there. I mean, we talk about the glory of God as like a noun and a verb, right? And you're like, all of creation like speaks of God's glory. Like,
Yep.
God's amazing, God.
Yeah.
So, anyways, they caught wind of me. I'm not such a great hunter, and then there was like 4 or 5 cars all of a sudden going back and forth on this road. I'm like, you guys, messing up my elk watching. So then, of course, we tried to track them down. We're literally driving down residential roads and through apartment complex parking lots looking for this herd of elk. I don't know. They disappeared. They're sneaky. They're just like, where did 50 elk go all of a sudden? But it's just fun. I mean, to see creation and how you're like, yeah,
And all of
that's
this
cool.
because of the Magi seeing the star in the east.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did we get there?
Just seeing God's creation. Yeah. When you see a shooting star or when I
There we
see
go.
elk and, it's fun.
Yep.
So-
Absolutely.
So they were drawn into follow Jesus. So I don't know, like Craig, what's your thought? Kyle, what's your thought? Like, how did they know about the Messiah all the way in the east?
Well, like I said, the Magi were a cult. They were a group of priests that had authority and influence, and they were knowledgeable, very well educated, knowledgeable of other cultures and what those other cultures were about and what they believed. One of those cultures being the Hebrew culture, and the fact that for generations, for hundreds and hundreds of years, they had been waiting for the Messiah to come. So the Magi know about that. I don't know beyond that, like what the star, how they knew that the star represented the birth of Christ. There's a lot of unanswered questions there. But these are guys that made it their business to understand other cultures. And so they're knowledgeable guys.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of obviously divine things happening here. We see it with angels appearing to multiple groups. So I don't know if Matthew just doesn't record this event of maybe some sort of divine interaction with the Magi and an angel, hey, follow that star, like we see with the shepherds and different stuff in different birth accounts. But again, I think going just a few verses later, it's interesting to me that, so then, Herod's kind of freaking out, and I think, there's obviously some political stuff going on there, worrying about, territory and his rule and all that kind of stuff. So he asks the question, hey, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? And so he wants to know. And they answer with prophecy. They don't answer with like, I don't know, we'll go out on the streets and hear. Like, they go, oh, we know where it is because we've been waiting for this. Again, the Hebrew culture had already known, verse 6, or verse 5, the answer to the question, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? In Bethlehem, they said, because that's where the prophet wrote this. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd of my people of Israel. So they answer the question with things that they've already known. Again, going back to what we talked about with the genealogy and Matthew's emphasis to Hebrew audience, that's the answer to the question. I find that interesting. They answered with, oh, we know the answer to that because we've known for a while.
Right. And they're not Jewish people, probably.
Yeah.
They're probably Gentiles, right? The Magi?
Oh, for sure.
So they're on the quote unquote outside. So I think Matthew's kind of pointing to the fact too, as we get started, he in chapter 1 was like, hey, this is a God thing. You Jews, this is foreshadowing the lineage, the history, the generations. But he's also making this point. Some of the first people to recognize the King of the Jews, the Messiah, were Gentiles who were on the outside, but it's never really on the outside because God's always been for everybody to know him.
He's always been for everybody.
Always been for the entire world to know him.
Yep.
He's leveraged the nation of Israel in special ways, but I hope people listening in don't get confused, and maybe you could help someone else that might be thinking like, oh, it was the Jews, and then we hopefully got in. No, through Abraham, and we talked about that last week. Abraham, the promise is
all the nations will be blessed.
All the nations through faith, before any Mosaic law, before really the establishment of a nation of Israel. It's through faith in God.
Yep.
So
I also think it's noteworthy that the Magi don't just come out of intellectual curiosity. They don't come just because, hey, road trip, guys, come on, let's go check this out. No, they said specifically why they had come. They said, we have come to worship.
Yeah.
So they had been putting the pieces together. Not only were they knowledgeable of the culture, but they understood the significance of this awaited Messiah and his presence. And they know he's young, just been born, but they're coming to worship. They've already made their decision.
Yeah, you said that earlier. You kind of talked about that in verse 2, and then I think that's really indicative of the reason of verse 3, where Herod's kind of freaking out. Like this idea, the weight of the reason they've come, not just to see what's happening or because they're interested, or again, even studying cultures, they would be like, oh, this is this is interesting. This is a historic event. We should go be a part of it, right? Like if something big was happening in our culture, people are like, yeah, we're close enough. Let's go watch it. This is going to be a where were you moment. And that'd be one thing. They're like, this is going to be a where were you moment. We should be there, right? We want to be on the front lines. But they didn't just come to be a part of it. They're like, hey, we're going to be the guys in the nativity scene for the rest of, like, let's be there.
They
Like-
had no clue, did they?
Right?
They probably would have got like royalty on that,
Yeah.
or like at least go. I don't even look like that. Can you make it a little bit more? Looks like me.
And there was more than 3 of us. We just brought 3 gifts. You just say 3 kings, but there was, And so,
Like 300 of us that came.
but their reasoning, their purpose is to worship. I mean, they have a reason to be there, and the significance of that. And I think that's again why Herod's going. Okay, there's people noticing this not as just a where were you event, but as a significant, glorifying moment of who this person is.
They needed to connect personally with Jesus. And that's, again, if you're reading the scripture, maybe you would have read Matthew before many times. And if you're tracking along with us, that you would just read through that Connect, Grow, Serve filter as Jesus' invitation, even if you could say before birth, even though he's eternal, is for all people to connect with him personally. He wants none to perish. He wants every single individual, every single soul, Jew, Gentile, across the world, to connect with him personally. And here's this group representing him
Yeah.
and
absolutely.
saying, we're going to worship. We're going to be there to worship. And I love how the star moves like, I just see it like it's here and then it, moves over here and it's above the house or above
It's
Bethlehem.
like a compass. It's
Yeah.
just pointing.
And I was again struck by how many times like God spoke to Joseph in a dream, through chapter 1 and 2. It's like, oh, it's like the main source of communication channel here. So maybe for the Magi, they got a instruction through a dream of like, wait for the star, it's going to happen. Boom, there's the star. Pack it up, let's go.
Right. Another thing that we miss in our nativity scenes, we have the Magi standing there with Mary and Joseph alongside the manger.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case, right? So this.
What?
I know.
That's my scene.
I know.
There's
right?
sheep there. There's a donkey.
Yep. No, it took the Magi time to get their entourage together, gather up their stuff for this long journey, and then to make the journey. So by the time they get there, when Herod says in verse 7, called the Magi and found out what the exact time was that the star had appeared, then he concludes, well, then Jesus is maybe as much as 2 years old at this point. So they're not still at the manger. They have moved from there and taken up a residence somewhere else. I don't know. We don't have any of those details.
Verse 11 says, on coming to the house.
Yeah, they're at a house of some kind.
Yep.
Yep. They
So-
saw the child with his mother, and they bowed down and worshipped him.
They had to go manger because there was a census being taken. People had to get counted, so they had to go to their hometown, get counted. Well, that was done and over with, so
Yeah,
they
those
left.
people left, so now there's room in the inn.
There's room into the VRBO. The Airbnbs were open, so
Yep.
you could get a house. They were staying there with a young child, not traveling. And then it was, again, to fulfill the prophecies of what was going to happen. Joseph, through God, gets this instruction in a dream. Hey, move. Herod wants to kill the king of the Jews. He's threatened, so go to Egypt. And then to fulfill that prophecy, and again, the foreshadowing of the nation of Israel, that salvation would come out of Egypt. That out of Egypt I called my son, verse 15. And that was to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. And so that's why, like you just said, Craig, Herod's going, well, he gives us instruction to kill every kid 2 and under, every male, firstborn male, right? Isn't
Yeah,
it firstborn?
that's just
the
a
boys, all the boys in
heart-wrenching-
Bethlehem.
It's a heart-wrenching part of this whole story that Herod would do something like that.
Yeah, which, man, you think how many of them escaped, ran away, protected their kids, hid their kid. You just think as a parent, what would you do? I'd do everything. But it's the threatening part of Jesus, where it's like God's got a kingdom and He's established it, and even Herod or any other power cannot overtake what God's up to, because God's about the business of saving His people, and we all
Yeah.
need that salvation. We all need to receive that personally. And I love it that there was this large group of people. We've covered a lot of different groups of people that were waiting for the Messiah. And we were talking about it at our community group, just in waiting for the Lord's return. Now we're at this stage in the story of Jesus is going to return again, like when He ascended, He said, I'm going to return. And we're to keep watch. We're to be alert. We're to, like the Magi, just in waiting, like as we're going about our everyday lives, helping people find and follow Jesus, to be ready for the return of the Lord, because he's coming back and he's going to restore all of the world, make it the way it is supposed to be. And it's just an exciting thing that we shouldn't lose sight of. Because like these people, like for us, you're like, I don't know. People have been saying God's been coming back like this year, forever, all these years. Like, is it really going to happen? Craig, your day, they said he was going to come back for generations.
So many people set timelines. I came to Christ in the early 70s, and it's like, we'll never make it to 1980 before Jesus comes back. Look at the world around us, right?
Right.
And then it was 1984, George Orwell, Big Brother's watching, all that. Then it was the year 2000, and I was, as a now more mature Christian into the 90s, I'm thinking, gosh, before Y2K, it could be. Jesus could come back. Well, here we are. It's 2022 now.
Yeah.
So on it goes.
Yep. And it shouldn't make us lose heart that it's not true.
Oh, absolutely not.
And that's the thing I think can trip people up, because it did for a lot of these folks. You're like, we've been waiting for the Messiah for hundreds, thousands of years. It's not happening. But it's going to happen. And it's good. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, Peter addresses that issue. He says, hey, don't misunderstand what's going on here. The fact that the Lord delays is not because he's slack regarding his promise. He is patient, wanting every last possible person who wants to choose to follow him to be able to do so. So he's going to wait until the very last person that he can see is going to actually respond to him, and then he'll return. That's Peter's point.
Yeah, we were kind of joking around about it, as far as somebody was like, well, is there just one more? Like, could we just go track them down, let them like hear the gospel, speed this thing up? Because in those days you're just like, I'm kind of tired, like with the world or with my situation, and the understanding of like being with Christ forever in heaven and eternity is the goal. And so it's like, does that person have email? Can we just shoot them a text? Can we track them down?
By the way, just a trivial little point here, but the reason that we see in the nativity scenes 3 magi, even though it doesn't specify that, is because of the verse that says, then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It doesn't say there was one gift of each, but that's what a lot of people concluded, and then from that extrapolated, well, there must be 3 of them. They each had a separate gift. No, there were multiple individuals, and there might have been numerous gifts of gold. We have no idea how much of an outpouring there was.
Yep.
3 gifts, and so we're like, 3 kings. They each brought a gift.
Yep, and three camels.
Yeah.
Got to have 3 camels for the 3 magi to ride on.
Yeah, it all works out.
Yeah.
And somebody was probably listening along going, guys, did you not read verse 12? That's how it works. So the Magi were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, and they returned to their country by another route. So God's instructions coming through a dream to them.
And to Joseph.
But how did they get started on the journey?
Right.
It's probably pretty safe to say God spoke to them through a dream.
We just don't have those details.
We just don't have those details. Somebody was like, thank you. I've been trying. They've been like, verse 12. Did you guys read that one? So it's one of those things, as we understand like the start of Jesus' life here on earth, gives us some clues into like the mission and the purpose, sets the groundwork as we jump, because Matthew just goes, and all the other Gospels, you kind of go from here's the start to boom, here's Jesus in action. Like there's a huge gap, and that's where, chapter 3, it's like here's John the Baptist preparing the way. The other gospel accounts clue us in with John's his cousin, and there's some more details there, but he just kind of goes from like, and he was born, and this is significance of the Messiah being born. This is some of the details around it, but not a lot of it. He goes from birth to like he's 30 years old or so, right? And jumping into a ministry. And like, wow, all right. Well, it's because he's writing to the account of, here's the one about the Messiah.
Right.
And so that's the purpose of like, why don't we have all of the teenage years of Jesus? Why don't we have, college decision years? Why don't we have early life?
I think he went to trade school, actually.
Did he go to carpentry school?
Carpentry school taught by his father. Yeah,
now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it wasn't when you're 30, then you could become a rabbi, official
Correct.
teacher.
That's absolutely right.
So that's the tradition. So that's why it's like, why did Jesus, quote unquote, wait? Well, that's when he would have authority with the culture and the people to respect him.
Correct.
And he didn't even need that. because he had miracles, and when he was teaching I don't forget where it's at in Luke, maybe. When he was teaching as a teenager, as a 12-year-old.
12-year-old.
Yeah,
Yep.
they were like, who is this
Yep.
teacher with authority? We've never heard this.
Yeah.
So he didn't need that, but he followed that pattern for whatever God's up to in the
So
the
at
plan
age
here.
12, he's knowledgeable of the scriptures enough to be able to teach in the synagogue, right, in the temple, and so then you have 18 more years before he goes public. What's he doing during that time? Luke tells us he's growing in favor and in stature with both God and men. So he's maturing and he's learning, and at a human level, not that he needs to learn because he's God, but
Yeah.
as a human being, he's studying the scriptures, becoming knowledgeable, and we'll see that show up in his public ministry.
Yeah. Which we'll jump into next time as we jump into chapter 3 and him starting to preach and this message of repent, the kingdom of God is here, and for all people to find and follow Jesus. And so, well, hopefully maybe we would this week grow. How did that go again? Grow in our...
Grow what is low. What's low needs to grow. Is that what
No.
you're talking about?
No. Grow in stature and favor of men.
Oh,
the verse you just
To
quoted.
grow.
Yeah, I thought you were going low. I thought you were going low
thought it was
growth thing
going
again.
grow.
No,
Yeah.
I wrote it down. What's low needs
Must
to
grow.
grow.
Nah, it doesn't sound as good now. In the context that you did, it was good, but now
What's
that,
low and needs to grow.
No.
It's Luke
All right,
2.
I'll have to work it.
Luke 2, I think verse 52, without looking it up, I'm not sure, but it
sounds
says,
right.
He grew in favor and in stature, both with God and men. So he
sounds
has a
like-
growing relationship.
Sounds like that's a great thing for all of us to do as we follow Jesus
Absolutely.
this week. All right. We'll see you next time.